Welcome to the TELPAS Alternate Speaking Domain Training Module. This presentation will cover information about how educators will rate the speaking proficiency of their students who are eligible for TELPAS Alternate. This presentation is for classroom teachers who will be administering TELPAS Alternate during the spring testing window. It explains the alternate proficiency level descriptors and observable behaviors for speaking, provides classroom examples of the speaking observable behaviors, and describes ways to make the observable behaviors more accessible to students. TELPAS Alternate is a holistic inventory aligned to the Texas English Language Proficiency Standards, or ELPS. The inventory is based on alternate proficiency level descriptors, or PLDs, that were created to address the specific access needs of emergent bilingual (EB) students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. The PLDs can be used to better understand the intent and scope of specific observable behaviors. They can also be used to provide a summary of a student's general English speaking ability after scoring. These are the alternate PLDs for speaking. Take a moment to review each column. In TELPAS Alternate, the observable behaviors are like questions the test administrator answers about a student. Each observable behavior measures one skill that is aligned to the ELPS. The skill can be found on the left, under the number of the observable behavior. The boxes contain descriptions of the characteristics that students learning English are likely to demonstrate over time. The descriptors show the progression of second language acquisition from one proficiency level to the next and are aligned to the TELPAS Alternate PLDs. You may discover vocabulary in the observable behaviors being used in a way that is different from common classroom usage. The TELPAS Alternate Test Administrator Manual includes a glossary with terms specific to this assessment that may assist you. The example shown here is high frequency, high need vocabulary, as used in observable behavior S3. The glossary shows the entry for the term high frequency, high need vocabulary, as it is being used in the observable behaviors. Texas teachers developed classroom examples to help test administrators better understand the descriptions of student performance for each observable behavior. Elementary and secondary examples describe one way that students could demonstrate each skill across the 5 levels of proficiency. Take a moment to look at the way the examples illustrate the increasing difficulty of the skill of retelling stories. An accessible version of the observable behaviors and classroom examples can be found on TEA's TELPAS Alternate Resources webpage. The purpose of the classroom examples is to illustrate how a student could demonstrate the skill at each proficiency level. There are many other classroom activities that could be used as examples for the observable behaviors. The examples provided are not intended to be used as test questions or performance tasks for teachers to replicate in their classrooms, although using them for this purpose is acceptable if needed. Teachers are encouraged to use their own activities in the regular classroom setting when determining a student's abilities to understand and use English. On this slide, you will find the first speaking observable behavior in the top row, and the elementary and secondary classroom examples below it. Take a moment to review this information. This slide, and the 8 that follow, show the remaining observable behaviors for speaking with their classroom examples. Some observable behaviors have an additional set of classroom examples. The TELPAS Alternate Observable Behaviors and Classroom Examples PDF includes these additional classroom examples. It can be found on the TELPAS Alternate Resources webpage and is accessible. When rating an eligible student, the test administrator should consider only one observable behavior at a time. The test administrator will read the skill and think about recent opportunities the student has had to practice that skill. Then the test administrator will read the 5 descriptions of student performance for the observable behavior and use his or her current knowledge and observations of the student's English language skills to make individual holistic judgments. The test administrator must consider the ability of each EB student to use English in the domain of speaking, in the context of skills the student is learning and practicing in the classroom setting. For example, think about how well the student has demonstrated the ability to understand or use English in the context of skills the student is learning. Also think about how well the student is able to understand or use English when practicing these skills in a classroom setting. Then select the description that most closely matches the student's performance most consistently. For purposes of this assessment, consistently means almost always acting, behaving, or responding in the same way. There is an early, a middle, and a late stage within each TELPAS alternate proficiency level. Students in the early stage of a proficiency level might demonstrate language that drops down into the previous level at times, especially when working with academic language or new vocabulary and language structures. Students in the late stage of a proficiency level will sometimes demonstrate language that reaches into the next level. For each observable behavior, test administrators must consider the description that applies to each student most consistently. Demonstrating a new skill once or even occasionally does not mean a student has crossed over into a higher level of proficiency. For students who might be in the very early or very late stage of a level, it is recommended that test administrators collaborate with others or ask others who are familiar with the students for input and wait until later in the assessment window to see whether a couple of additional days of observation will help clarify the most appropriate description of the student's abilities. This is an example of how a teacher named Mr. Bain approached rating Veronica, one of his EB students, who is on the border between 2 levels. Take a moment to read through this example. Note that the 2 levels inside the red oval are the levels Mr. Bain is considering for this observable behavior. Below the observable behavior are the notes Mr. Bain has taken about Veronica's progress so far this year. Here is another example of how a teacher approaches rating a student on the border between 2 proficiency levels. Take a moment to read about how Ms. Hodge considers Omar's progress this year. For TELPAS alternate, the word English is used in a broader, more inclusive way to allow for all modes of communication in English. Some EB students use sign language, Braille, or another method of communication as a substitute for traditional English in one or more domains. Test administrators should allow students to use one or more alternate response modes, listed on the following slide, if the students regularly use the response mode or modes during instruction and in accordance with the individualized education plan. Alternate response modes are only intended for students who cannot listen, speak, read, or write in a traditional way. They are intended to address the communication needs of students based on their disability. For the speaking domain, a student may use one or more of the response modes listed here, in accordance with the provisions outlined in the previous slide. Augmentative and alternative communication is a means other than traditional spoken or written communication, by which a student can share a message with others. Examples of augmentative and alternative communication include gestures, facial expressions, picture cards, picture boards, sign language, speech generating devices. switch-based output devices, and real objects. This list is not exhaustive. Prompting is an action intended to initiate or continue a task that the student is being requested to complete. A prompt pulls the student through each step to the end of the task. Leading is asking the student to respond in a specific way or with a specific answer. Leading is not allowed. Prompting is allowed for rating the observable behaviors on the TELPAS alternate assessment. The purpose of TELPAS alternate is to accurately measure a student's ability to understand and use English to engage in social and academic learning environments. Prompting a student to respond to a task so that his or her ability to understand or use English can be accurately measured is acceptable. There are a total of 8 PowerPoints to help educators learn about TELPAS alternate. This has been the training on the speaking domain of TELPAS alternate. The other PowerPoints are listed here for your reference. If you have any questions about the information in this PowerPoint, please contact the Student Assessment Division of the Texas Education Agency using the phone number or help desk email shown here. If you have questions about administration logistics or test materials, please contact Texas Testing Support. These slides were prepared by the Texas Education Agency's Student Assessment Division. You are encouraged to use them as is for local training. If you change any of the slides for local use, please hide or remove Texas Education Agency logos, headers, or footers by editing the master slide. You must also remove the photographs. Only the Texas Education Agency has parental permission to use them for training purposes. This training is not intended to replace any materials or additional information on the Texas Education Agency website.